Hello, I'm Esther Gidui-Ewart. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. A four-day ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war is underway in Gaza as the first group of hostages are released. South African Olympian Oscar Pistorius, jailed in 2014 for killing his girlfriend Reeva Steenkamp, has been granted parole. In Music Time in Africa, host Heather Maxwell takes us inside Nairobi's music and entertainment scene with interviews, live music, and music talk on KBC Entertainment TV. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. A four-day truce between Israel and Hamas is underway in Gaza and released some Hamas-held hostages. Some of the 150 Palestinians held by Israel is also ongoing. The truce includes a comprehensive ceasefire in North and South Gaza. Spokesperson Majed Al-Ansari told journalists in Doha earlier.
The communications that took place and the meetings that took place all through yesterday went on until early morning. Today with the Egyptians and the parties of the conflict present here in Doha. The meetings went very well and in a positive environment, and the results, of course, was the implementation plan of the agreement, which we have always said needed to be something that is concrete and very ready to create a safe environment.
According to the deal, 50 women and children who were abducted from Israel by Hamas on October 7th will be released in exchange for 150 Palestinian women and minors jailed in Israel. 13 hostages will be released from Gaza on Friday, and additional groups of hostages will be released each day of the ceasefire until 50 are freed. Israel has received an initial list of the hostages who are to be released from Gaza on Friday, according to the Israeli Prime Minister's office. Now, for the latest on the hostage release, I'm joined live from Tel Aviv by Ricky Rosen. Ricky, what more can you tell us on the status of the hostages for prisoner swap?
We still don't know. The hostages were released about 2 hours ago to a hospital in Gaza into the hands of the Red Cross, who then brought them into Egypt. And as far as we know, they still haven't been transferred into Israeli hands. So we can't confirm their state, except that the Red Cross did initial medical checks, checked their eyes because they've been sitting in the dark for 50 days, gave them mineral water, checked their vital signs, changed bandages, and reported this all to the Israeli authorities so that the Israeli medical authorities who are waiting to receive them, as well as and especially their families, know that they're on their way.
I can imagine the tension there, the anticipation of their arrival. What are you hearing from families who are awaiting their loved ones?
There are really mixed feelings, not just from the families, but from all Israelis. There's relief that the process of releasing the hostages has finally begun, and sadness on the part of families that the vast majority of the 240 hostages have not been released and will only be released slowly. We're expecting, haven't received yet the list of the hostages who are supposed to be released tomorrow. That list has not arrived. And there's a lot of tension about what awaits the hostages as they begin their recovery.
Thank you so much, Ricky. We look forward for more updates as time goes on. Ricky Rosen, reporter, live there for us from Tel Aviv, Israel. Now, for insight on the negotiation process and the likely well-being of the hostages and prisoners, VOA's Carol Van Dam spoke with Len Rubenstein of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
We don't know what's going to happen next. It would certainly be wonderful if it were extended. There has been talk about possibly having negotiations for release of more hostages, extending this pause, and maintaining the supply of humanitarian aid. If that happens, it would save many more lives and benefit Palestinians and Israelis.
As you know, these aid trucks are getting in now, and more, way more than there was in the past. Is this going to make a serious dent in the suffering of the thousands of people, Palestinians that are stuck in northern Gaza, especially?
Well, it's certainly about time after all these weeks for more humanitarian aid to come in. Before the war, there were 500 trucks a day, and the most before now was like something like 100. And given the extent of the catastrophe from a humanitarian standpoint, it's essential that the increase in number of trucks coming in be maintained. It's going to take an enormous amount of work, an enormous number of supplies to restore, in any sense, the ability of Palestinians to live in Gaza.
Are you hopeful that fuel and the other emergency supplies are going to be getting through now in these next 4 days?
Well, part of the deal, as I understand it, is that fuel will be coming in. More fuel will be coming in.
And I suppose that fuel and things like that are going to be going directly to hospitals and facilities like that.
Yes, the idea is for the fuel to come in without control by Hamas. So that it won't go to Hamas-operated facilities. It will be monitored. There will be all kinds of checks and inspections and the like to make sure it's not used for military activities by Hamas.
That was VOA's Carol Van Dam speaking with Len Rubenstein of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. For months, the group Brothers in Arms protested policies of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government they saw as a threat to democracy. When the war with Hamas began, the network of volunteers was well organized to take on a new challenge, helping evacuated civilians and saving the agricultural sector. VOA's Natasha Mosgovaya reports.
When the war between Hamas and Israel started, 32 residential areas in South Israel were evacuated, as well as 28 residential areas in the north. The country's agricultural sector was among the hardest hit. In the first days after the October 7 Hamas attack, this dairy farm in Kibbutz Nir Yitzchak, about 5 kilometers from the Gaza border, stood empty. The electricity supply to the barn was damaged. Cows were not fed or milked.
At the beginning, the barn's managers over the phone tried to explain to the soldiers who had no idea about cattle how to milk cows.
Help came from an unexpected source. Brothers in Arms, a movement founded by a group of the former Israeli military commanders that spent 9 months protesting what it called the anti-democratic policies of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government. The movement stepped in to organize volunteers to deal with the crisis.
I think what made us different than other protest groups was because we are all ex-officers, commando officers and submarine officers, naval commander and all this. We are very good in planning operations, in driving activities.
Ronan Kohler, one of the Brothers in Arms founders, says he spent 42 years wearing the Israeli Navy uniform. He says the activity is managed at a headquarters handling logistics and the network of 8,000 volunteers in the field. Volunteers with combat unit training were the first to respond.
Got into their cars and just drove to the south and just engaged with everything that was needed, helping soldiers, getting civilians out of their homes. They just did what was needed. The other half, which were less trained, actually said, okay, we're going to be here at the back in Tel Aviv and we're going to support you.
Over the past few weeks, the operation grew from procuring protective gear and packing and distributing and donating supplies to sending groups of volunteers to pick the harvest in evacuated areas and keeping the farms alive. Lee Moll, who came to volunteer in Kibbutz Nir Yitzchak for the second time, says he came because despite the Hamas attack, for him this barn is a place of hope.
They could have closed the barn and asked for compensation from the government. But it's a matter of values, of ideology, of mutual support. We are all in it together.
He says when the volunteers started working on restoring operations on the farm, they had to throw away all the milk.
For 2 weeks we were milking without light, in darkness, just with light from outside. And step by step, everybody was excited about everything when we moved from 1 milking per day to 2. And then we were waiting for approvals that the milk we were getting is good to go to the market or it'll be thrown to garbage. It was one of the happiest moments in my life when we got the message that the milk quality got approved and it was back to normal.
Things in Nir Yitzhak are hardly back to normal. Just before the evening milking shift, volunteers join a few members of the kibbutz at the local cemetery for a commemoration ceremony for those who were killed by Hamas on October 7. Most of the kibbutz members are still evacuated. 3 were kidnapped by Hamas, and kibbutz member Doron Stamker tells us most of the kibbutz fields are not reachable because of Hamas mortar fire.
The fields right now are not workable. It's on that side, near Gaza. It's impossible to get there because of safety issues. It's the peak of the season. Potatoes, carrots.
Produce from the villages near the Gaza border that volunteers were able to save is sold these days in a pop-up market in Tel Aviv. Organizers say that it was moved to the underground parking lot because of the sirens warning of incoming rocket attacks. I ask Brothers in Arms leaders if the war changed their position toward Netanyahu's government. Ronen Koller says that protesting until the war is over is not a viable option.
It doesn't make sense from any perspective to go and demonstrate now and be active against the government while our friends are fighting. It also doesn't make sense from a security. We don't want our policemen to protect a demonstration rather than protect the citizens.
He adds, though, that the movement stands behind its message that Prime Minister Netanyahu failed in most of his decisions of the last year and that he should leave office. Natasha Mozgovaya, VOA News, Kibbutz Nir Yitzhak, Israel.
Former South African track star Oscar Pistorius, jailed in 2014 for killing his girlfriend, Riva Steenkamp, has been granted parole according to the Department of Correctional Services. Rachel Judah has more.
South African former Paralympian Oscar Pistorius is set to be freed from jail after being granted parole. Pistorius was jailed for shooting and killing his girlfriend, Riva Steenkamp, at home in Pretoria on Valentine's Day 2013. The once hero, known as the Blade Runner for his carbon fibre prosthetic legs, will be released on January 5th. After hearings that caught the world's attention a decade ago, Pistorius was initially jailed for 5 years in 2014 for culpable homicide by a high court. But in late 2015, the Supreme Court of Appeal found him guilty of murder after an appeal by prosecutors. He was sent back to jail for 6 years, less than half the minimum term sought by prosecutors. Then, in 2017, the Supreme Court more than doubled his sentence to 13 years and 5 months, saying the term originally handed down was shockingly lenient. The Steenkamp family did not attend Friday's hearing, although spokesperson Rob Matthews read out a message from Riva's mother, detailing the toll the murder had had on the family.
I'm not attending Oscar's parole hearing, as I simply cannot muster the energy to face him again at this stage. Barry's demise has opened up the wounds in many ways caused by Riva's death. I had forgiven Oscar long ago, as I knew most certainly that I would not be able to survive if I had to cling to my anger. I do not believe Oscar's version that he thought the person in the toilet was a burglar. In fact, I don't know anybody else who does.
Rachel Judah of Reuters filed that report. Chad is hosting more than 1 million refugees, one of Africa's most prominent and fastest growing refugee populations. The recent conflict in neighboring Sudan is driving hundreds of thousands more across the border. VOA's Paul Ndiho has more.
The number of Sudanese refugees in Chad has doubled in the past 6 months. Many refugees arrived in the country after fighting in Sudan erupted in April. Despite growing humanitarian needs, response resources are dwindling, leaving aid groups with few options. Chad is already struggling amid multiple crises, from acute food insecurity to malnutrition, particularly in children. The refugee crisis puts further pressure on food-insecure communities.
The Chadians, they have already shared whatever they could share. They can't share anymore. They even need assistance themselves. So now we need to assist all those 600,000 refugees that came, the returnees from Chad that were living there, but also now we also need to support the Chadian, the host population that are there, that are also suffering like all those Sudanese that have arrived.
The United Nations Refugee Agency data shows the picture is very concerning in sites hosting Sudanese refugees. Malnutrition is a significant concern, with 1.3 million children suffering from malnutrition, or 8.6% of children under 5, 1.5% are classified as severely malnourished, according to the latest emergency food security assessment conducted in eastern Chad. Under its emergency response, the World Food Programme plans to assist nearly 3 million people across Chad, according to refugees, internally displaced persons and vulnerable Chadians. The WFP says food and cash-based assistance will be provided to people affected by sudden emergencies, such as floods. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
As industrial mining expands in Namibia, small-scale miners whose families have worked the land for generations say they're being displaced. Vitalio Angola reports.
You are digging like this?
With an iron chisel and hammer in hand, Richelin Tanisses hammers a rock on a hilltop not far from where she lives, in the mountainous settlement of Uwis. Tanisses is part of an impoverished community, largely made up of small-scale miners who for centuries have made a living selling jewels and minerals like tin, copper and crystal. The Ministry of Mines and Energy spokesperson, Eshoshange Hashela, tells VOA the authority has at least 5,000 to 10,000 registered small-scale miners in its database, some of who are operating outside the laws.
There are still those small-scale miners which are still mining illegally, sometimes simply because they believe they born there. They've been doing that before all these requirements came about. But yes, there are a lot of other unregistered small-scale miners which are mining illegally, and this is a challenge from the regulator point of view.
But legally or illegally, there is a family tradition of mining in this region that precedes the large-scale industrialization of the area.
The thing is, our grandparents were mining already in this area. That's why we are also mining in this area, because we learn from them. They fit us with the team, and then we see how our elders were doing. That's why we are following their footsteps.
John Andrew Kelly is an activist in the Uwis.
But we are poor people, my lord. We are poor people. Most of us, after the reopening of this mine currently, we're hoping for the green pastures which have come like a crocodile is wading in the water and the food is coming to them. We feel like we will enjoy the fruits, my lord. But it's not like that. This is the time we are more oppressed.
He says the miners have been displaced by huge corporations such as Australia's Andrada Mining and China's Xingfeng Investments. These large multinational corporations now own the land the indigenous or artisanal miners have been working. Andrada Mining, registered in South Africa with headquarters in the United Kingdom, says there is no artisanal mining activity in the company's current footprint. Andrada spokesperson told VOA. Xingfeng Investments, on the other hand, said the company recognizes the small miners' presence and is willing to work with them. but they have not been approached officially or unofficially by any of the small-scale miners for consent to mine within the boundaries of their mining premises. Authorities admit these indigenous mining areas are now private land. To solve the problem, government officials say they are consulting with the mining giants to allow the small-scale miners access to these areas. Vitalio Angula, VOA News, Windhoek, Namibia.
Still to come, today's entertainment report takes us inside Nairobi's music and entertainment scenes. Stay tuned.
You're watching VOA's Red Carpet. My name is Jackson Vunganyi. Thank you so much for joining us each week right here on Red Carpet. We bring you the latest in
Away from the vibrant capital, Nairobi, the northern region of Kenya is dealing with severe drought. This week, we are bringing you a special edition of Our Voices, part of Voice of America's recently released documentary, Hunger Voices. We're highlighting the effect of climate change on women and girls. We hear from a woman promoting a solution and encouraging everyone to take action. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
In other news, the World Health Organization says it has confirmed sexual transmission of Mpox in the Democratic Republic of Congo for the first time as the country experiences its biggest ever outbreak. Mpox is a disease caused by monkeypox, which is endemic in densely forested regions of West, Central, and East Africa. And Chad's military rulers have announced a general amnesty ending prosecution and guilty verdicts over the deaths of hundreds of protesters in a 2022 anti-government rally, according to a minister. The opposition and NGOs previously denounced the amnesty as a move by the government to shield the police and military officers responsible for the killings from justice. New York hosted its 97th Macy's Thanksgiving Parade featuring 48 character and novelty balloons, 26 floats, 12 marching bands, and more than 700 clowns. Aaron Rannin has this recap from New York.
The Thanksgiving Day Macy's Parade is held in New York City and begins the countdown to Christmas. Thousands line the streets of Manhattan on Thursday to catch a glimpse of the annual spectacle.
It's just amazing the details that you see up close when you're here instead of just on TV.
I think post-pandemic, to see so many people out celebrating and having a wonderful time, it warms my heart. And yay, New York is back and here to stay. Woo!
The parade traces its roots back to 1924, when many Macy's employees were first-generation Americans who wanted to create a winter parade like they experienced in Europe.
New York City has always been an immigrant city, and there were a tremendous number of immigrants working at Macy's at the time, as there were in any New York City department store. And I think that they were definitely bringing back some of their Christmas traditions from the countries that they had come from.
Angus Johnson explains that the giant balloons were introduced 3 years later with a unique twist.
In the early years of the parade, when they started with the balloons, they would release them at the end of the parade and offer a $100 reward to anybody who was able to track one down and find them.
The parade has run almost consecutively for 97 years, except for a break during World War II.
From 1942 to 44, they suspended the parade because the rubber and the helium that were used in the balloons were needed for the war effort. And then they brought it back in 1945.
Almost 100 years later, today's balloons can stretch up to 5 or 6 stories high. Each balloon in the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade requires 8,000 to 19,000 cubic meters of helium, with filling costs reaching a minimum of $500,000. Additionally, each balloon requires 80 to 100 volunteer handlers.
This is my first time doing the parade, and I'm so excited. Having a great time. Energy's amazing, crowd's amazing.
The first televised parade took place in 1946 and was limited to the New York area. Last year, over 27 million people viewed the parade on video and television. And this year's parade is also believed to have generated massive viewership numbers on multiple platforms. Aaron Rainan, VOA News, New York City.
It's time for Entertainment Report, and joining us is Heather Maxwell, who just returned from a tour of East Africa. Hello, Heather.
Hello, Esther. Hello, everyone. Yes, so I did just come from East Africa, spent some time in Nairobi, Kenya, where I was catching up on the music and entertainment scene in the city. At the Go Down Arts Center, artists came to tell their stories on my Music Time in Africa radio show. There was young rapper Trio Mio and his mother, Eunice. Award-winning country singer Sir Elvis also played and sang. He sang beautiful original and cover songs by American legends like Hank Williams and Jimmy Rogers. He was there. And so was the legendary rap group Kalamashaka. Now, I also caught up with entertainment journalists. I had a wonderful conversation about African music and entertainment on Kenya Broadcasting Corporation's Entertainment Thursday with Vivian Ndegwa. Now, on Friday nights, just like this one we're heading into now, if you want to be at the heart of live music, you have to be at the Gecko Cafe. I was lucky enough to catch a group called the Jazz-tified with guest artists Justo and Josek Asikoye of the famed Jabali Africa Band. Here is a taste of that wonderful vibe Friday night. All right, and that's our entertainment segment for today. Back to you, Esther.
Thank you so much, Heather. Be sure to join Heather Maxwell's Entertainment Reports right here every Friday on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.